It all began with a phone call. One of those calls that you never expect to get in a million years, and when you do, it hits you like a sledgehammer. You know the kind, where the world goes quiet and every word feels like a punch in the gut. My life changed forever in that moment, and I never saw it coming. She's not like the others, the doctor said. Your daughter's going to be different. She's autistic. She may never be able to speak, never be able to live a normal life. Those words hit me so hard, I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I just stood there in complete silence. I think I was waiting for the doctor to say, "Just kidding," or "We made a mistake." But there was no mistake. And then the next words came, even worse than the first. "We think it's better if you let her go." Let her go. The daughter I had carried for 9 months. The little girl I had imagined growing up and playing in the park with me, running around with other kids, talking to me about school, maybe even one day getting married, having children of her own. Let her go. How could anyone say those words? I remember staring blankly at the doctor, my mind racing, my heart beating so loudly I could hear it in my ears. But the doctor's face remained calm, matter of fact. And the words, they hung in the air like a weight, heavy and oppressive. "We understand this might be difficult," the doctor continued, but I couldn't hear her anymore. All I could hear was the voice in my head screaming, "How could you suggest giving up on my daughter?" I remember walking out of that office in a daze, my body moving on autopilot. My legs felt like lead, my hands cold. It was like I was watching someone else walk out of the building, not me. I tried to reach for my phone to call my husband, Alex, but my hands were shaking too much to dial. The words kept echoing in my head. Let her go. How could I? The doctor didn't know my daughter the way I did. She didn't know how Lila's little fingers wrapped around mine when I held her, how she would look at me with those big brown eyes and just stare as if trying to understand me, trying to figure out the world around her. She didn't know how Lila's smile would light up my whole world, like the sun breaking through dark clouds after a storm. But that wasn't enough for everyone else. My own family, Alex's family, even my friends, they all thought the same thing. Maybe it's for the best. Maybe it's too much for you. Maybe you should let her go. They said it in different ways, of course. My mother-in-law said it in a calm voice, like it was the most rational thing in the world. You can't raise a child with special needs. It's too much for you. You'll ruin your life. Alex's friends said it more bluntly, as if they were simply offering advice. You need to think about your future. You can always have another baby. And my own mother, she just cried. She didn't say a word at first. But then, through her tears, she said the words that tore me apart. You don't want to live with this, honey. It's going to be hard. You don't deserve this. Maybe it's better to give her up. It was like being stabbed in the chest over and over again. Each person, each word, driving a deeper wound. I was standing there in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the walls. The room felt so small all of a sudden, the air thick with the weight of their words. Maybe it's better to give her up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But I couldn't. I just stood there, paralyzed by the shock. And then I heard Alex's voice. He was standing behind me, not saying anything, but I could feel the tension in the air. I turned to look at him, and all I could see was the confusion in his eyes. He had heard the same thing from his family, from the same people who were supposed to support us. Maybe it is for the best. Tara, he said quietly, looking down at the floor. I mean, think about it. It's going to be hard. For all of us. She's not going to be like other kids. It's not what we planned. What we planned? I thought of all the things I had dreamed for Lila. The first day of school, learning to ride a bike, watching her dance in the living room, and all of the hopes I had for her future. I had never once thought that the world would not be kind to my child, that my daughter would be considered a burden instead of a blessing. I felt my heart crack in half as I looked at Alex. My husband, the one person I thought would be there for me no matter what, was already giving up. In that moment, I realized I was the only one left who was still willing to fight for her. The room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to make Alex, my family, anyone understand. They couldn't see what I saw when I looked at Lila. They didn't see the same little girl I did. So I did the only thing I could think of. I walked out. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to leave. I had to get away from all the voices telling me what I should do with my daughter. I needed to think. I needed to clear my head. And that's when I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to give up on Lila, no matter what anyone said, no matter how hard it was going to be. I would never give up on my child. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I didn't know where I would start. But I knew one thing for sure. I was going to fight for her, no matter what it took. But little did I know, that moment, walking out of that house, would be the start of a journey that would take me years. And in the end, it would test everything I thought I knew about love, about family, and about the lengths a mother would go to for her child. Before all of this, everything seemed normal. I had the kind of life I always imagined I would. A simple, happy life with a family I loved, and a home that felt warm with laughter and comfort. Alex and I were high school sweethearts, and after years of dreaming, we finally had the family we always talked about. Lila was our little miracle. I remember the day I found out I was pregnant like it was yesterday. I had been feeling unusually tired for a while, and one morning, I decided to take a test. When I saw that second line appear, my heart leapt into my throat. I ran into the living room, holding the test like it was the most precious thing I had ever seen. I didn't even say anything at first. I just handed it to Alex, who was sitting on the couch, his coffee mug in hand. He looked at the test for a second before he dropped his mug, his eyes wide with surprise. "You're serious?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. And then we both laughed. I remember the sound of our laughter filling the room, the lightness of it, as if nothing could ever go wrong. The pregnancy was difficult, but it was also filled with moments of joy. When I felt Lila's first little kick inside me, I remember Alex holding his hand over my belly, feeling it for the first time. He laughed softly, whispering, "That's our little girl." The months passed, and soon, our house was full of preparations. We painted the nursery a soft pastel yellow, filled it with stuffed animals, little books, and a crib that I spent hours picking out. I'd sit in there, daydreaming about the future, imagining the sweet little girl who would soon fill this room with her laughter and cries. I had always been so sure of what my life would be like. I'd be a mother to a happy, healthy child. I'd take her to the park, to the zoo, and maybe even sign her up for ballet class one day. We'd make cookies together, and I'd watch her grow up and go to school, making friends and experiencing all of the milestones that every child should experience. Alex and I had the same dreams. He would be the proud father at school events, cheering her on at sports games, and teaching her how to ride a bike. Together, we'd be the family that people envied, loving, supportive, and strong. But of course, life isn't always as perfect as we imagine. I didn't know it at the time, but things began to change the moment Lila was born. The delivery was a long and exhausting one, hours of labor, and when she finally came, there was a sense of relief, and then confusion. The doctor handed her to me, and I remember staring at her, searching for that immediate connection I had been promised. But there was something that didn't feel right. Lila didn't cry. She didn't move the way other newborns did. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, but she didn't seem to focus on me. Her eyes weren't wide with wonder, the way I had seen in the stories. They were distant, unfocused. I tried not to let it bother me. Maybe she was just tired, I thought. She had been through a long birth too. But then, as the days passed in the hospital, something became more and more clear. Lila wasn't reacting the way I expected a baby to react. She wouldn't make eye contact. She didn't coo or smile like other babies. It wasn't a major thing, just small signs, little things I brushed off at first. But they stayed with me. I remember sitting in the nursery at home, holding her in my arms. Alex was sitting next to me, his arm around my shoulder, both of us looking at Lila, watching her as she lay in her crib. "Do you think she's okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Alex looked at me, his face unreadable. "She's just a baby. She'll be fine." But the way he said it, the way he avoided eye contact, I knew he was already beginning to sense something. Over the next few months, the doubts grew. Lila wasn't meeting the milestones we expected. She didn't babble or try to say her first words. She didn't even respond when I called her name. It was subtle at first, and like any new mother, I kept telling myself, she's just a little slow. She'll catch up. But then I started to notice more. She didn't make the eye contact that every other baby did. She didn't react to sounds or toys. She wouldn't even smile at me. The pediatrician reassured me when I brought it up, telling me that every baby develops at their own pace. But in my heart, I knew something wasn't right. It wasn't just that she was a little slower to develop. There was something deeper, something I couldn't explain. And then came the day that shook me to my core. We were sitting in the living room, just like any other day. I was holding Lila in my lap, smiling down at her, trying to get her to look at me. "Lila," I said softly, my voice full of warmth and love. "Look at Mommy." But she didn't. She didn't even flinch. Her eyes were fixed on the wall, distant and empty. It was like a cold wave had swept over me. I knew then that something was wrong. The next few days were filled with endless doctor's appointments and tests. The doctors told me not to worry too much, that some children took longer to develop. But deep down, I knew something was off. And that was when the words began to echo in my mind. Autism. The first time I heard it, I couldn't process it. Autism? My daughter. But the more I researched, the more I understood. Autism didn't mean she wouldn't be able to love, to live, to have a fulfilling life. But it did mean that our journey would be different from what I had imagined. I was devastated, of course, but I also couldn't ignore the love I felt for her. She was still my daughter, the one I had dreamed of, the one I had carried. I wasn't going to let this diagnosis define her. She was more than that. But then came the phone call that would change everything. The one that would rip our family apart. It wasn't until a few months later that the full weight of what I was facing truly hit me. At first, I had tried to brush off the little signs, the way Lila didn't respond to my voice, the way she seemed to withdraw when I tried to engage with her. But when the signs became too persistent to ignore, when they piled up day after day, I knew something was wrong. Something that couldn't be fixed by love alone. It was a cold winter day when the first real clue came. I remember it clearly because it was the first time I felt my heart sink with a kind of certainty. Lila was sitting on the floor in the living room, surrounded by her toys. I had put on her favorite cartoon, the one with the brightly colored animals that usually got her attention. She didn't even look up. I called her name, softly at first, then louder. "Lila, honey, look at Mommy." But nothing. It was as if I wasn't even there. I bent down, gently cupping her chin in my hand, and tried to guide her gaze toward me. Her eyes were glazed over, distant, as if she couldn't even see me. I felt this strange coldness wash over me. This is not how it's supposed to be. I tried again, more urgently. "Lila, please, look at me." She blinked but didn't meet my eyes. She didn't even flinch when I waved my hand right in front of her face. She just kept staring at the screen, completely absorbed. That moment hit me like a freight train. For the first time, I understood what everyone had been saying. There's something different about her. I hadn't wanted to believe it at first. I wanted to tell myself she was just a little slow, that maybe she'd grow out of it. But this moment, this undeniable lack of recognition, was the turning point. I couldn't deny it any longer. There was something wrong, and that something was something I didn't know how to fix. I remember the dread that settled in my stomach as I sat back on the couch, watching my daughter. I wanted to run to the doctor, to find some way to get answers, but I also knew that I wasn't ready to hear them. I wasn't ready to face the truth that had been slowly creeping up on me. I told myself that maybe it was just a phase, maybe she would snap out of it. Maybe she was just a late bloomer. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The next few days were a blur of worry, confusion, and constant second-guessing. I kept thinking about that moment, her sitting there, ignoring me as if I wasn't even in the room. I didn't know how to fix it, or even if it could be fixed. I talked to Alex about it that night, after putting Lila to bed. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the lights dimmed, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I could feel the weight of everything I hadn't said, everything I was scared to admit. He looked at me, his face a mask of concern. Maybe she's just different, Tara, he said, his voice slow, cautious. She's just a little behind. That doesn't mean anything's wrong with her. But I could tell he didn't believe that. Not really. He was saying it to reassure me, but there was an edge to his voice, a doubt I hadn't heard before. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just stared at the table, lost in my own thoughts. I didn't want to admit it either, but it was becoming impossible to ignore. We had known something was off for a while, but now, I knew. I knew. Lila wasn't just a late bloomer. There was something else at play here. The next day, I took Lila to see the pediatrician again, though I wasn't sure what I was hoping to hear. I had already read enough online to know that I couldn't keep pretending. It was in those little signs, the way she wouldn't respond to her name, the lack of eye contact, the emotional detachment. It was too much to ignore. The pediatrician did the usual checks, the routine developmental assessments, but I could tell from the way she was looking at me that she was getting concerned too. She didn't say anything at first, just took her time writing down notes, checking her charts. But finally, she looked up at me, her face sympathetic but serious. Tara, she began slowly, I think we need to talk about some next steps. Lila is showing signs of autism spectrum disorder. I felt my world tilt on its axis. Autism. The word seemed to hang in the air, thick and heavy. I had read about autism, of course, but hearing it about my own child felt like a punch to the gut. I had no idea what this meant for her, for our family, for our future. The pediatrician went on to explain the next steps, evaluations, therapies, specialists. But all I could think about was that word, autism. It felt like the door had just closed on the life I had imagined for Lila. That future full of laughter, joy, and normalcy that I had been holding onto so tightly seemed to vanish in an instant. I left the office with 1,000 questions racing through my mind. What would this mean for her? For me? For our family? What would life be like now? The hardest part, though, was looking at Lila in the back seat of the car, unaware of the storm that was brewing in my heart. She was humming softly to herself, lost in her own little world, just like she always did. And as I watched her, I couldn't help but wonder, how long would it take before I could accept the truth? That night, when Alex came home, I tried to explain what had happened. I tried to tell him about the diagnosis, about the path we would need to take. But I could see the fear in his eyes, the uncertainty. He didn't know what to say either. He didn't want to believe it. But deep down, I could tell that he already had. That night, we sat in silence, not knowing what to do next. It was like we were both holding on to some semblance of hope, but that hope was starting to slip away. And that's when the real battle began. Not with doctors or specialists, but within our own hearts. Would we accept this reality, or would we fight it? The tension between us started to build in ways I hadn't expected. Alex wanted to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't real. He wanted to bury the truth deep down and keep going with the life we had planned. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't bury my daughter, not like that. I couldn't pretend she wasn't the same little girl who had changed my life forever, no matter what label anyone put on her. As the days passed, the gap between us grew wider. Alex and I were no longer on the same page. He was afraid, and I was determined. But the more I pressed forward, the more isolated I felt. The tension in the house became unbearable. The distance between us, too wide to ignore. The days following the diagnosis were a blur of appointments, evaluations, and well-meaning advice. Everyone seemed to have an opinion on what I should do next, but I felt more lost than ever. How was I supposed to move forward when everything I had believed about Lila's future had just been turned upside down? I started attending therapy sessions with Lila. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavioral therapy. It seemed like all I was doing was shuffling between offices, watching my daughter struggle to communicate, while I struggled to understand how we had arrived here. Lila wasn't like the other children. She wasn't supposed to be like this. She was supposed to grow up like any other child. She was supposed to be independent, happy, and free. But now, everything felt uncertain. Every day was a challenge, and every small step forward felt like a monumental victory. When Lila first made eye contact during one of her therapy sessions, I wanted to burst into tears. That was the first breakthrough. She had seen me. For just a second, our worlds connected. She hadn't turned away, hadn't withdrawn into her own little bubble. It was small, but it was enough to give me hope. But even those small moments of connection were clouded by doubt. Was it enough? Would it ever be enough? Could we ever truly reach the potential I had imagined for her? It didn't help that Alex and I were drifting further apart. He didn't seem to understand why I was pushing so hard. He didn't understand why I couldn't just accept that things were different now, that we had to adjust our expectations. We had another fight that night. It started as a small disagreement about whether we should be spending so much money on therapy, but it quickly escalated. The tension in our house had been building for months, and neither of us knew how to diffuse it. "You can't fix her, Tara," Alex said, his voice low and full of frustration. "We can't just make everything go back to how it was. She's not going to be like the other kids. That's just the way it is." His words stung, but there was truth in them. I knew it, and I hated it. It was true that Lila wasn't going to have the life I had imagined for her. She wouldn't fit into the mold I had created, but she was still my daughter. And the life I wanted for her wasn't one defined by normalcy. It was one filled with love, with growth, with moments of joy, however they might come. But Alex couldn't see that. He couldn't see past the fear. I could feel his reluctance, his desire to avoid facing the reality of our situation. He wanted to run from it. Maybe because facing it meant admitting that everything we had hoped for, wasn't going to happen. "Maybe you're right," I said, the frustration evident in my voice. "Maybe I can't fix her, but I'm not going to give up on her. I'm not going to just sit back and accept that she's broken." Alex didn't respond immediately. He turned away, running a hand through his hair in exasperation. "Tara, I don't know how to help her. I don't know what you expect from me." The silence between us was suffocating. I wanted to scream, to make him understand, but I knew it wouldn't help. He was too scared to confront the truth, just like I had been. I had to accept that, but it didn't make it any easier. Later that night, as I sat in Lila's room, watching her sleep peacefully, I couldn't help but wonder, what if they are right? What if I'm wrong to believe she can overcome all this? The doubts crept in like shadows, whispering that maybe I was fooling myself. Maybe I was setting her up for a lifetime of disappointment by pushing so hard. But every time I looked at her, every time I saw her little face light up when I smiled at her, I knew there was still hope. A few weeks later, we had another appointment, this time with a specialist who was supposed to give us more insight into Lila's condition. The therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Williams, asked us a series of questions about Lila's behavior. How she interacted with other children, how she responded to new situations, what activities she enjoyed. I told her everything, the good and the bad, trying to paint a picture of my daughter that felt true. Dr. Williams asked us to bring Lila in for testing. She wanted to see firsthand how Lila responded to different stimuli. Alex and I sat in the waiting room, both tense, both unsure what to expect. I kept my eyes focused on the door, watching for any sign that Lila was okay. When they called us in, I felt the lump in my throat. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I watched as Dr. Williams sat across from Lila, who was playing with a set of colorful blocks. At first, Lila didn't seem to notice Dr. Williams at all. But then, after a few minutes, she started to make noises, little sounds, rhythmic humming. I had never heard her do that before. Dr. Williams noted it down, her expression calm but focused. "This is a good sign," she said softly, glancing up at me. "She's engaging with the activity, even if it's in her own way." I could see a flicker of hope in her eyes, and for a moment it felt like maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for Lila to connect with the world around her. After the session, Dr. Williams gave us her assessment. Lila is showing some classic signs of autism, but she's also showing strengths that we can build on. It's important to focus on what she can do, not just what she can't. We'll help you create a plan to give her the best opportunities to grow and develop. I left the office with a mix of emotions: relief, hope, and fear. Lila's path wasn't going to be easy, but I knew then that there was still a way forward. But the hardest part was yet to come. The days that followed Lila's evaluation were a blur of emotions. Part of me felt lighter, as though the fog of uncertainty had lifted just enough to let in some clarity. But there was also a deep, gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, a feeling that I couldn't ignore anymore. I had been so focused on fixing things for Lila, so consumed with the idea of her being normal, that I had missed the most important truth of all. Lila didn't need me to fix her. She didn't need to fit into the mold of what society called normal. What she needed was love, acceptance, and the patience to guide her on her own unique journey. And it was time I accepted that. The realization didn't come overnight. It was gradual, like the sun slowly rising after a long, dark night. But when it hit me, it was like a light bulb flickering on. I had spent so long grieving the life I thought we would have that I hadn't given enough thought to the life we could still have. A life with challenges, yes, but also a life full of love, growth, and moments that didn't fit into anyone's expectations, but our own. But this shift in perspective wasn't easy. There were still moments when the weight of Lila's diagnosis would crush me, when I'd find myself crying quietly in the kitchen, alone, wondering if I was strong enough to carry us both through this. One night, after another difficult therapy session where Lila had been particularly withdrawn, I found myself sitting in the dark of the living room, staring out the window. The rain was coming down heavily, tapping against the glass in rhythmic waves. I heard the familiar sounds of Alex moving around upstairs, probably working late again, retreating further into his own world. We hadn't talked much about Lila's progress, or lack thereof, over the past few weeks. It was like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. That's when I realized that I had been waiting for someone to tell me what to do, to give me permission to act. But I didn't need permission anymore. I had to do this for Lila. I had to be the one who stepped up, who decided what our life would look like moving forward. I couldn't keep waiting for Alex to come around. I couldn't keep depending on everyone else to give me the strength I needed. It was time to take control. The next morning, I made a decision. I called the specialist's office and scheduled a meeting to discuss an intensive treatment plan for Lila. I also reached out to a support group for parents of children with autism. I needed to learn more, to connect with others who understood what I was going through. I had been isolated for so long, stuck in this bubble of fear and self-doubt. It was time to open up to the world, to stop being afraid of what people might think or say. That night, I sat down with Alex, and for the first time in weeks, we really talked. I didn't hold anything back. I told him about the therapy appointments, the support group, the plans I was starting to put in motion for Lila's future. I told him that I was ready to move forward, whether he was ready or not. "I'm not asking you to agree with everything I'm doing," I said, my voice steady but filled with the determination I hadn't felt in months. "But I need you to understand that this is my fight now. I'm going to fight for Lila, and I need you with me." Alex didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, his face hard to read. But after a long pause, he finally spoke. "I don't know if I can do this," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can be the person you need me to be. This is all too much for me to handle." His words cut deeper than I expected. I had hoped that this conversation would bring us closer, that we would finally align on the path forward. But instead, it felt like another wall had gone up between us. "I understand," I said softly, my throat tight. "But I can't stop. Lila needs me. She needs us both, and if you can't be here for her right now, I'll carry us through this alone." Alex didn't respond. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of everything was pressing down on him, too. And in that moment, I knew this was it. I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep waiting for Alex to come around, for him to get on the same page. I had to move forward with Lila, no matter what it took. The next few weeks were difficult, to say the least. There were still moments of tension between Alex and me, moments when I felt like I was fighting this battle alone. But with every step I took, every therapy session, every doctor's appointment, every small breakthrough I saw in Lila, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The more I worked with Lila, the more I began to see her strengths. Yes, she had challenges, but she was also so much more than her diagnosis. She was clever, intuitive, and full of potential. Every little gesture, every smile, every sign that she was connecting with the world around her, it was like a victory, a reminder that she was still my daughter. My beautiful, precious daughter. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be more struggles, more setbacks. I knew that. But I also knew that I wasn't going to let the world's expectations define Lila. I was going to fight for her, no matter how hard it got. One afternoon, I was sitting in Lila's room, watching her play with her toys, when I saw it. She reached out, her tiny hand grabbing onto one of the stuffed animals. She held it up to her face and made a little giggle, one of those giggles that filled the room with warmth. For the first time in a long while, I saw her, really saw her. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would never give up on her. I would never let anyone tell me that she wasn't worth fighting for. She was my daughter, and I would fight for her until my last breath. But I knew it wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about Lila and me. I had to make Alex understand, make him see what I saw. That was my next step, getting him to see the light, to come back to me and to our daughter. But that was a battle for another day. For now, I had to keep moving forward, one step at a time. I don't remember the exact moment when I stopped being afraid. Maybe it was that night when Alex walked away from me for the last time, leaving me to face this battle alone. Or maybe it was when I realized that the fight wasn't just for Lila anymore, it was for myself, too. For my own strength, for my own future. What I do know is that I stopped waiting for things to be easy. I stopped waiting for anyone else to step up. I knew that if anyone was going to make a difference in Lila's life, it had to be me. And from that moment on, nothing was going to hold me back. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. Each day brought new challenges, more therapy appointments, more paperwork, more tears. But with every step forward, I felt stronger, more sure of myself, more sure of Lila. I had found my purpose. I started to take control of her future. I didn't ask for permission anymore. I researched everything I could find about autism. I joined support groups, talking to parents who had been through the same struggles. I learned about alternative therapies, about how to create a sensory-friendly environment for Lila, and about teaching her in ways that made sense for her. No more waiting for someone to tell me what to do. I was going to create the best life possible for my daughter, no matter how hard it was. The most difficult part was getting Alex to understand. He wasn't wrong, but he couldn't see the truth the way I did. He still saw Lila's autism as something to be fixed, something to be avoided. He still didn't want to face the reality of our situation, and the more I pushed, the more he pulled away. One night, after another difficult conversation where I could feel the distance between us growing, I realized that this wasn't just about Lila anymore. It was about me, too. About who I had become in the face of all this pain. I couldn't keep hiding behind the woman I used to be, the one who was scared of the future. I had to embrace the new me, the mother who would do anything for her child. The mother who had found strength in the midst of chaos. I knew I had to go on this journey alone if Alex wasn't ready to be part of it. But that didn't mean I had to do it in isolation. I had my friends, my support group, and, most importantly, I had Lila. And she was the reason I kept going. I remember the day everything changed. It wasn't anything big. It wasn't some miraculous breakthrough. But it was everything to me. Lila had been struggling with speech for months. Her therapist had been working with her on simple words, on forming sounds, and on responding to cues. But she had never been able to say a full word. Until that day, we were sitting in the kitchen, playing with her favorite toy, one of those colorful plastic blocks that she loved to stack. She was concentrating hard, her little face scrunched up in concentration as she fit the pieces together. I was sitting beside her, talking softly, encouraging her. And then, as if out of nowhere, Lila looked up at me, her eyes meeting mine, and she said one word. Block. My heart stopped. I could barely breathe. I stared at her, not sure if I had heard it right. She said it again, louder this time. Block. Tears filled my eyes as I hugged her tightly. You did it, baby, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. You did it. In that moment, everything changed. The doubts, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it vanished. I had always believed in her, but now I knew that my belief wasn't misplaced. She had it in her all along. I knew then that no matter what happened, no matter how hard it got, I would never give up on her. I would never stop fighting. For Lila, for me, for us. But there was still a long road ahead. There would be more days like that one, when the weight of it all would threaten to crush me. Days when Lila would regress, when the progress we made would feel like it was slipping away. But I knew now that every step forward, no matter how small, was worth fighting for. Later that night, after Lila had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, thinking about everything we had been through. The pain, the isolation, the loss of the life I thought I would have. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that I had found my way through the darkness. And then Alex came into the room. He was standing in the doorway, hesitating for a moment before speaking. His face was softer than it had been in weeks, his eyes searching mine. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have been there for you more. For her. I didn't know what to say at first. The walls between us had been so high for so long, it was hard to know how to bridge the gap. But I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could figure this out together. You're here now, I said softly. That's what matters. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel so alone. The next few months weren't perfect, but they were better. We started working together more, Alex and I, learning how to be a team in this new life. We still didn't have all the answers, but we were beginning to understand each other again. And Lila, she continued to surprise me. Every day, she made new strides, even when they were small. But those small steps added up. Slowly but surely, she was finding her voice. As for me, I had found mine, too. Life after that moment, after Lila's first word, felt like stepping into a new world. One I hadn't quite expected, but one I was finally ready to embrace. The weight of the uncertainty that had hung over me for so long started to lift. I could breathe again, but it wasn't all perfect. There were still tough days, days when Lila would regress, days when the old doubts would creep in like shadows in the corners of my mind. But the difference now was that I knew how to fight them. I had learned that every small victory mattered, every little step forward was progress. And those days when Lila would struggle, those were the days when I had to remind myself that setbacks were just part of the process. It didn't mean we had failed. It just meant we had to try again, and again, and again. Alex and I began to find our rhythm again, but it wasn't easy. We had been through too much, and the distance between us had been too wide. But after that night, when he apologized, when he finally acknowledged what I had been carrying alone for so long, there was a shift. Slowly, we started working together more. We sat down with Lila's therapist, making decisions together about her future. We had long conversations about her needs, her strengths, and what kind of life we wanted for her. We made it clear that we were in this as a team, no matter what. But I knew that rebuilding our relationship wouldn't happen overnight. There were still walls between us. There were still nights when we didn't know how to communicate, when we disagreed on what the next step should be. But there was something I hadn't had before. Hope. Hope that we could figure this out. Hope that, with time, we would find our way back to each other. One of the hardest parts was seeing the way Alex struggled with accepting Lila's diagnosis. He wanted her to be fixed, wanted to believe that there was a quick solution, something that would make everything go back to normal. But I had come to realize that normal wasn't what we needed. We needed a different kind of strength, a different kind of life. And I had to learn how to show that to Alex, how to help him understand that our new reality could still be full of joy, love, and possibility. It was a slow process, but every small moment when we agreed on something, when we worked together for Lila's sake, felt like progress. There were also moments when I would find myself sitting in Lila's room, watching her play or sleep, and I would feel a profound sense of gratitude. I had spent so many months mourning the life I thought she would have. I had spent so much time imagining the life she should have, that I almost missed the beauty of the life we were having. Lila had her challenges, yes, but she also had so much to offer. Her smile, her laugh, the way she looked at me with those bright eyes, as if she was trying to figure out the world around her. I had spent so much time focusing on what she couldn't do, that I had nearly forgotten to appreciate everything she could do. And in that shift, I realized how much I had grown, too. I wasn't the woman I was before. I wasn't the scared, uncertain mother who thought she could never handle this. I had found a new version of myself, one who was strong, resilient, and unwavering in her love for her daughter. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid anymore. As for Alex, well, things were still complicated, but there were more good days than bad now. We started to make time for each other again, to have honest conversations about our fears, our hopes, and the future. I could see that he was beginning to accept Lila for who she was, not in spite of her autism, but because of it. He was starting to understand that she wasn't broken. She was just different, and that was okay. I remember one afternoon when Alex took Lila out to the park. I had been nervous. He had always been a little distant with her. But when they came back, he was smiling. It was small, but it was everything to me. He had found a way to connect with her in a way that felt natural, without trying to fix her. He was learning to just be with her. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a glimpse of the father I knew he could be. But it wasn't just Alex and me who were learning. Lila was learning, too. She was still nonverbal, but she was starting to use sign language more and more. I would watch her as she signed more, or pointed to things she wanted, and my heart would swell with pride. She was finding her own way to communicate, and that was all I could ever ask for. There were still hard moments. There were still nights when I cried, when I doubted myself, when I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing. But now, I knew I wasn't alone. I had my family, my daughter, my husband, and together, we were learning to navigate this new life. Together, we were learning that it wasn't the life we expected, but it was a life worth living. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would still be struggles, moments of despair, and setbacks. But there would also be joy. There would be laughter. There would be moments of connection, of growth, of triumph. And that was enough. Looking back, I realized that the path I thought was going to be the one I walked with Lila, it was never going to be that way. It was always going to be different. But that doesn't mean it's any less beautiful. I spent so many months wishing for a life that could have been, for a version of Lila that fit into the world's idea of normal. I fought so hard against the diagnosis, against the reality that had been handed to us. And in doing so, I almost missed the truth. Lila wasn't broken. She didn't need to be fixed. She needed acceptance. She needed me to see her for who she was, not for who I wanted her to be. It's easy to get caught up in the expectations, in the fear of what might be or what could have been. We all want the perfect story, the perfect outcome. But life doesn't always work that way. And that's okay. In fact, that's more than okay. It's beautiful. It's real. Lila has taught me more than I could ever teach her. She's taught me the power of patience, the value of every small step, and the importance of embracing the present. She's taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up every day, no matter what. I spent so many years fighting against the reality I was handed, but I've learned that the real strength isn't in fighting against what's beyond your control. It's in accepting it and making the best of it. It's in finding the beauty in the imperfections, in the things that don't fit into a neat little box. It's in the quiet moments, those small victories, that life truly unfolds. When Lila said her first word, when she made eye contact with me for the first time, When Alex and I held hands again after months of silence, those were the moments that mattered. Not the big, dramatic moments, but the everyday ones. The moments where we chose to keep going, to keep loving, to keep fighting for each other. As I sit here today, looking at my daughter, I realize how much I've learned, not just about her, but about myself. I am stronger than I ever thought possible. I am a mother, yes, but I am also a woman who can weather any storm, who can face any challenge, as long as I have love to guide me. And love is always enough. To anyone out there who feels like they are fighting an impossible battle, who feels like their world is falling apart, I want you to know this. You are stronger than you think. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to be scared. But don't ever give up on the people you love. Don't ever give up on yourself. Because sometimes it's in our darkest moments that we discover the brightest parts of ourselves. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. And always remember, no matter what life throws at you, the journey is never over. You're never alone. You have the strength to keep going, one step at a time.